Hey, what's up, guys? This is Cole and Cody with CJC Off-Road. We're here for another one of our Q&A segments. I believe this is the fourth one we've done now, so had a lot of fun with these and had very positive results. So we're going to jump right into this. The first question we received is in regards to alignment. A lot of people ask, what kind of alignment specs should I use for my truck? We received these questions both from Ram owners, from Ford owners. So we're going to basically go at this from the perspective that you're running like a leveling kit or 3-inch on the Ram and like a 2.5 or 4.5 on the Ford, since those are the products we specialize in. But to start with the Ram, you want to go ahead and start?
So yeah, typically we recommend somewhere between a 4 to 5 degree caster setting. I'm jumping a little bit ahead. As far as what settings are available on your truck, there are very few alignment settings on a solid axle truck. You essentially have the caster setting. On the Rams, the toe is not, or the camber is not adjustable. On the Ford, it is adjustable with the bushings. However, once you do manipulate a bushing a certain way, you do risk losing caster. So usually we say to keep the camber neutral on those trucks as well. And before we dive into any numbers, if you already have one of these systems on your truck and you like how it drives, do not take it to an alignment shop, please. Chasing alignment numbers is a kind of a big issue some of our customers run into. Just based off how much variation is in some of these laser alignment setups, things like that, the numbers do have a little bit of a range. So if you do already have a system on your truck and it drives really well, do not touch it. It's good. You're not going to wear out your tires prematurely unless you've hit 36 curbs this morning. You're not going to have any issues. So if it is driving good, don't touch anything. But yeah, jumping into the numbers, caster setting, even on the Fords, usually we like to look for somewhere between 4 and 5 degrees of caster. On the Ram, sometimes it's a little easier to achieve due to the radius arm drops in the 3 1/4 inch systems or just the factory cam bolts that are underneath the trucks. On the Fords, you are limited to usually a 1 or a 2 degree caster shim, as well as the 1 degree of added caster provided by the Carli suspension fabricated arms. Toe in, usually we recommend either neutral toe or a very slight toe in. If you're doing it yourself with a tape measure, usually we say about an 1/8 inch of toe. Realistically, with that 16th. Realistically, I like to say 1/8 inch. He says 16th inch.
Of toe in.
Yeah, of toe in. But with that said, there's so much variations in just play and things like that in tie rod ends that I don't think you're going to run into too many tire wear issues. And the advantage of some slight toe in is that the truck will want to self-center a little bit better. As you say, you make a right-hand turn, the truck's not going to stay turning right, and you're going to have to correct it. The toe will help the truck correct itself.
Keep in mind, a big thing we see, we're starting to see a lot more of is cross caster. So when you align your Ram truck, when you align your Ford truck, ideally you want the caster to be relatively even side to side. Now, in a lot of cases, if you have tires that are pulling left or right, you have to do or have to set a little bit of cross caster in your alignment in order to correct that tire pull. Keep in mind, Fords are very forgiving. So Fords, you can have 1 degree shim on the driver's side, a 2 degree shim on the passenger side, and it's fine because the caster is built into the knuckle, right? On the new Rams, the biggest issue is that when you cross caster them, they actually lean toward the side with less caster. So keep in mind, there's a lot to stabilizers, correcting tire pull, things like that. That's questions. Obviously, feel free to reach out. But just the goal to get the proper alignment in general is to have the caster as matched as possible. I'd say on both sides of the truck.
I would say our next question is about steering stabilizers, and that is why you very often see us push a single-sided stabilizer versus a dual stabilizer setup from other brands. Even those of you who call us and ask about like a high or low mount and different stabilizers like that, we like to usually only sell one, and that's because typically the tires that we run on a lot of our installations here and a lot of the setups that you guys build at home, you're using like a Toyo MT, a Toyo RT, a Nitto Ridge Grappler, or the Trail Grappler. These tires have a native pull to them, and so with that native pull, while for instance, a Toyo MT is going to want to pull right when you hit highway speeds, you'll feel the truck want to drift. On like my Ford, I have just the single Carli high mount stabilizer with 200 PSI in it, and that stabilizer is using that 200 PSI to kind of push the steering to the left. What happens is when I drive down the road, I can take my hands completely off the steering wheel, and that truck on like a 37 by 1350 MT, which is typically a very difficult tire to align with, so to speak, or to fight, to counter the pull, my truck, I can drive straight down the road. And so that is where stabilizers come in very handy, especially these ones. A lot of people make the argument, if I have two and they're pushing everything to the center, why would I want a one-sided one? There's not too many kits out there that have dual, shocks that are capable of going up to 200 psi, actually controlling these bigger tires, as well as, for instance, like the Carly stabilizers, a fully stainless body and things like that, where you're not going to run into corrosion issues, premature failure and that kind of stuff.
In a lot of cases, you'll see these cool-looking dual stabilizer setups driving or on trucks driving around town. In most cases, believe it or not, those are actually junk. Believe it or not, one good nitrogen-charged steering stabilizer will do more to control your steering than two junk stabilizers. So definitely something to keep in mind. Another cool thing with these stabilizers is, as Cody mentioned, you can make stabilizers pull one way or the other, right? So Carly Suspension has actually developed multiple steering stabilizers for most of these applications. So if you have a 14, 18 Ram, their low mount stabilizer can push right, their high mount can push left. The new Fords, high mounts can push left, low mounts can push right. So you have a lot of cool options to really fine tune how your truck drives. We understand this can be pretty confusing, so we encourage you guys to reach out to us. We're more than happy to answer any questions and help get you pointed in the right direction, no pun intended.
Yeah, so quick breakdown. If you have a 2008 and up Ford, if you're running a Toyo MT, you would want the high mount. And if you're going to be running like a Nitto Ridge Grappler or a Toyo RT, you would want the low mount stabilizer. And if you have a 14 to 18 Ram, like you mentioned, the Toyo MTs, you would want the high mount stabilizer. And if you have the Ridge Grappler or the RT tire, you would want the low mount stabilizer. For those of you who have stuck with us, I figured I'd get a quick breakdown of just kind of which one you would want in a Cliff Notes fashion.
And to make this even more confusing, some trucks just tend to pull right. And so...
yeah, well, especially the new electronic steering on like the 2020 Fords. Yeah. Every once in a while we're running into one where the truck with the new electronic steering assist thinks it's off-center, but even though the truck is driving straight, the electronic motor, you're fighting that. So that is a whole nother arena of problems. It's not really an issue. It's something you can work through. Now, if you look on your dashboard in the off-road function on your cluster, you can actually see where your truck thinks your steering is in relation to where you're at. So for those of you that do have those trucks and are working on them in your driveway, that is a quick tip for trying to help center your steering wheel.
Again, we don't mind answering questions, so feel free to let us know if you have any.
Absolutely.
When you go to actually install one of these stabilizers, keep in mind that these Carly, actually, and the Fox stabilizers in a lot of cases,
even some of the King stabilizers.
Yeah, the Carly and Fox stabilizers, though, generally have a Schrader valve to control the nitrogen pressure. And there's a range, right, where you have to set the stabilizer in order to get the correct amount of push out of that stabilizer. The setting out of the box, which is usually 140 psi, is not always the correct pressure for your application. So keep that in mind. We receive a lot of calls. Guys will throw the stabilizer on and say, hey, why is my truck pulling? In most of these cases, it's actually just a matter of adjusting that stabilizer pressure down. General safe rule of thumb is anywhere between about 70 psi up to about 200 psi. These stabilizers should function. So that's a big amount of range. Obviously, the less pressure, the less it pushes. More pressure, the more it pushes. So there's a little bit to that, and a lot of times it requires a little bit of fine tuning to get it exactly where you want it. But that's the nice thing, is that you actually can adjust these. So it's pretty cool. So the last question for this segment that we received is, I'm shopping for a new Ram, and I see they have an air assist option, both on the 2500 and 3500. Is this softer than a traditional spring setup, and is it something you recommend?
Yeah, so one thing we hear a lot from customers, like with these air assist, or even air ride trucks, is, my salesman told me, because of the air suspension, especially in the rear, it's going to ride like it's on a cloud, right? That is the implication with air suspension. That is definitely not the case with these trucks. These are 2500 and 3500 trucks, 3/4 ton and 1 ton trucks. They are set up to haul. So the airbag setup that comes on these trucks is designed to hold an extreme amount of weight. And the benefit of that is, if you're towing a wide variety of trailers, using it as a work truck, things like that, the truck's going to auto compensate for the variety of loads that you have in the truck. So on one hand, it is definitely not riding on a cloud. However, these trucks are very convenient for those of you who, I guess, guys who are hot shotting, going between goosenecks, bumper pulls, and different, trailers like that, or just hauling a variety of things. And then, there's also the suspension packages that we offer that can help smooth out the front end dramatically while still helping control the rear end. Even though it's not a traditional coil spring in the rear, a good set of shocks will still help kind of control how the truck reacts or how those airbags react, and how it complements the overall ride experience of the truck.
My general rule of thumb is 2,500 trucks tend to be relatively a draw if you're keeping the rear stock in terms of ride. If you're going to change out the rear, I'd recommend getting a non-air ride 2,500 because you have more options in terms of aftermarket suspension. 3,500, those trucks are very stiff. Really the only system that is directly catered toward Ram Air Ride 3,500 trucks is the Carli Pentop system, which does work great. So, it really depends, I guess, what your goals are for the truck, what you're going to be replacing. If you're just going to do the front on a 3,500, I'd probably advise to avoid the Air Ride model. It offers a better balance in terms of ride quality and things like that, while still actually working really well for towing.
Yeah.
So, again, all this is very application specific, but if you are planning on heavily modifying your truck, it's generally advised to avoid the Air Ride models and get a standard spring configuration. Gives us a whole lot more to work with, and you have a lot more cool aftermarket upgrades available to you with those non-air ride trucks.
And yeah, anything to do with off-road, those, they're an air spring, but they do not compare to the coil spring, right? Like once you run the Carli 3¼ system with their, tuned variable rate rear coils, there's going to be no comparison. The air ride systems are still able to go off-road, and it's not that you can't go off highway. However, if you are in a position where it's A or B, and you plan on doing a little off-roading, definitely go with the coil spring truck over the air ride.
100%. So we're happy you guys joined us for this session again. Any questions, again, feel free to reach out by phone, email, contact us on the YouTube, leave a comment. A lot more of these videos are coming, so if you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe to this channel. We're happy to have you. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.